The word transgender is quite the attention getter. Whether it be on the news, on your Snapchat feed, or your family talking about it over Thanksgiving dinner, the debate between transgender athletes has never been talked about more. In the last decade, the debate about transgender people and their status throughout society has continued to evolve and change in our growing world. People have opinions that make them feel as though we can never reach a consensus or agreement. This is not true. Together, we can use thought and reasoning in order to understand transgender athletes and their struggles as people who are just trying to fit in to their community just like the rest of us. Transgender people should be allowed to play sports with the gender they identify with. Not only is there such a small fraction of transgender athletes advocating for these rights, it seems silly to give it the time of day, but real people are being hurt and discriminated against while just trying to be amongst their peers and people they feel connected with. In the article, how some states are moving to restrict transgender women in sports, by the New York Times, they say that only 50 students throughout the country have had to bring issues of not being able to play with their identity that they identify with their gender. Is 50 people being happy really worth an entire debate that ultimately just hurts the athlete and the way in which they view themselves? No, this is not true. Facts about the transgender community, and especially facts surrounding the anatomical differences of males and females in sports and the abilities they grant each other, are very spotty and not very reliable or accurate at all. These just continue to elaborate falsities that are not true. According to the article, The Fight for Transgender Athletes to Compete by Emelita Benton, biological differences do not take such a toll that people think. Interviewing transgender athlete Lindsay Hexcox explains that after transitioning, she had lost much athletic ability while transitioning, and it isn't even fair to make the comparison that she has the biological abilities of a man anymore past transition. The APA even quotes, "Many experts would argue that early blocking of puberty and transitioning hormonal treatment minimize the biological effects of genetic sex." The APA stands for the American Psychological Association, and cited from their website, describes themselves as the leading scientific and professional organization representing psychology in the United States, with more than 122,000 researchers, educators, clinicians, consultants, and students as its members. They further state in their mission statement that they promote advancement, communication, and application of psychological science and knowledge to benefit society and improve lives. Hormones like blockers, estrogen, and other products used by transgender athletes take part of that biological argument for those who are anti-integration of transgender athletes, and puts it in a different perspective by understanding that their bodies are much more similar that they are playing with than they think. So things aren't even as different as people think. For many transgender people, the day-to-day is extremely more difficult than cisgenders. They deal with discrimination, feeling like they're an outcast, and an array of different moments in their lives in which they are actually feeling the decisions that are being made around them, and feeling those effects even harder. Transgender youth are already suffering, with Reuters.com citing that almost 42% of transgender adolescents have had at least one suicide attempt. Transgender youth are just trying to fit in, and by excluding them, the effects on their mental health will be forever there. These effects on mental health are forever lasting and will never change. According to the APA, pediatricians have come to the consensus that these bills against transgender athletes are harmful towards transgender youth. That further validates the point that legislation is based on myths and misinformation, and overall misinformation about medical and surgical aspects of gender-affirming care. Also, the APA states that transgender youths are at an increased risk of mental health issues and suicidal tendencies. Quoted, "What I know about transgender children is they're just like any other kids. they want to fit in. Proposing not letting them fit in sports will greatly impact their physical and emotional well-being, not just as athletes, as regular children as well. Quoted by Dr. Al Noloff from the APA. Transgender adolescents are the future of our nation, society, and the leaders of our future, families and children. Ultimately, transgender athletes are a huge discussion throughout our community. Though some may say transgender athletes have a biological advantage on the sports field, this is a fact that time after time has been discredited by experts in the field of health and psychology. People need to take a look at science and facts and trust evidence in seeing that supporting transgender athletes is not only scientifically fair and just, but the marks that these decisions made against transgender athletes run deep and affects an entire community and group of people. In conclusion, transgender athletes are just looking for a place to find comfort, inclusivity, and friendship throughout their lives, just like all of us. Legislators creating laws that discriminate against transgender athletes are not only morally incorrect, but have been proven by experts to be detrimental to a child regarding their mental health and happiness as humans on this earth. I think it is important to work for a society in which we uplift each other and grow to be stronger and more educated individuals. The issue of transgender athletes is no different. Thank you. Hi. So now we're on to the Q&A portion of my speech. So the first question I got was, how can you bring more attention to the issue of transgender athletes? So I would say the first thing that you could do to bring the issue to light or to talk about it with people is just to start talking about it with your friends. Ask your friends, hey, have you heard about this debate? Is this something you've ever been informed of? Do you know what transgender people are like? Do you know the struggles that they face? Do you know the discrimination they face? And if they don't, maybe take that time to educate them and fill them in on things that they maybe wouldn't know, and maybe it would get them to change their opinion or at least educate them to know a different side of view of the issue. The second question I got is, do you think educating kids on gender identity early on in schooling could create a more inclusive place for those who are transgender? 100%. I think that if we normalize talking about transgender people and normalize talking about the discrimination and the normal day-to-day activities that we cisgender people participate in and how it can affect those who are transgender who don't have the same possibilities, I think by starting at an early age and trying to understand this concept and trying to really understand the concept of inclusivity and the feelings that it can make people feel, such as happiness, joy, and just upliftment is so important in schools, and earlier the better. People say it's easier to learn a language when you're way younger, and I think it's the same thing of acts of kindness. When you're younger, you can learn these things and begin these new ideals that can teach a new generation how to respect and look forward at this issue with valid and full information. The next question I got was, how do you become educated? So throughout my speech, I cited several sources such as the APA, the American Psychology Association, which is a great resource that has scientific and valid data that supports the transgender athletes inclusion movement. I also would say go to GLAAD, which is another website that is committed to promoting the inclusivity of the LGBTQ community. And I would just say do your own research. See what fits you. See what fits your way that you understand and try and figure it out for yourself, because then you can go out and educate others. How did I become educated? I became educated on the subject just like I said. I said how you could do it, that's how I became on it. I heard people talking about it. I had heard a couple people from where I'm from coming out as transgender, and so trying to be an inclusive person, I tried to educate myself on the issue, and now I chose to write it for my essays and speech. Why do people have such strong opinions on this? I would say this is a pretty controversial issue, you know? If people didn't have strong opinions, then that's what makes America great. You know, everybody is entitled to their own opinions and their own feelings, especially when it comes to their children or their performance as an athlete. But if you look at the data that I stated, and then you look at the effects that it can put onto a transgender person, especially an athlete, I think that my case is pretty clear. And when did I form an opinion? I didn't really form a solid opinion, I think, until I was probably last year when I had really started researching it. And still, I'm open to new information and want to continue educating myself and others. Thank you guys so much. Bye.